In this video, I'm taking a look at Anker's flagship 250 watt prime charger, a 6-port gallium nitride desk charging station that's been developed to free up some of your wall outlets without sacrificing the ability to charge lots of devices at pretty high power. That said, as always, in the interest of full disclosure, this device was sent to me by Anker, though they had no say in this video content, so I'll do my best to share the things that I like and perhaps dislike about it. Let's get into it. Anker's 250 watt prime charger is a pretty sleek looking desktop accessory. Definitely something that's noticeable, but it doesn't stand out as being too flashy or eye-catching. The front of the charger is where the action is, with a sleek black glass panel tilted at 12 degrees to make it easier to read while sitting on a desk or counter. This has 4 USB-C ports, equally spaced across a roughly 2-inch length, with a small screen that's about 0.8 inches tall directly above, which blends pretty well into the black glass, though not perfectly. By default, this screen shows the present power draw on the USB-C ports, as well as the total power output in a small fuel gauge style arc, showing how close you are to the 250 watt limit. Additionally, if connected, the Wi-Fi status will be in the top left corner and the Active Shield 3.0 logo in the top right corner. This lets you know that the charger is monitoring temperature, that the input and output voltage protection is active, that the current is regulated, and that the short circuit protection is working on the charger's output. All good things. Around the right side of the charger, we find 2 USB-A ports, as well as a small 12.4mm diameter push and scroll knob that's quite tactile and used to manually interact with the device. This allows you to click into any of the ports to get more information about the voltage and current, or to set any of the USB-C ports as priority to ensure they receive more power when multiple devices are connected. Scrolling past the USB-C ports, we get to the combined USB-A ports, as well as the settings menu. Here you can change things like the brightness of the display, the screen timeout, the power mode, knob orientation, initiate Wi-Fi connection, though you do need to pair the charger to the Anker app to actually connect to Wi-Fi, and change the screensaver between a few different clock modes, or reset the device. It's worth noting here that you can only choose between 3 clock styles manually on the device, but through the app there are 11. I'm not sure if there's actually a reason for this, or if it's just Anker's way of pushing users to sign up for an account and use their app. The main, kinda space gray body of the 250 watt prime charger is a plastic housing that has a linear texture cut into it, giving it a nice feel. On the top we find a polished Anker logo, and on the back there's a detachable C7 to C8 power cable connector. It's nice to see this because you can replace the cable if it were ever to be damaged. Finally, flipping the charger over, we find 2 long silicone feet bordering the technical certifications and power breakdown of each port. These, along with the rather hefty 640 gram weight, help to stabilize the charger so that you can easily plug and unplug cables without it sliding all over your desk. That said, let's take a look at the charging breakdown across the ports and the different modes available. The USB-C ports across the front of the 250 watt prime charger are labeled C1 to C4 moving left to right, with the USB-A ports A1 and A2. Though which is which matters less here because they're treated as one combined port for power limits. The C1 port is the most powerful, capable of delivering up to 140 watts. It does this through the voltage and current limits that are shown on the screen, and notably, this is the only port capable of powering devices with 28 volts at up to 5 amps. This is really the only difference between the C1 port and the C2 to C4 ports, which are each independently capable of delivering up to 100 watts. Then we have the USB-A ports, which combined can deliver 22.5 watts, though it's worth noting that these are the only ports that offer 10 volt and 12 volt charging. Now obviously that totals up to more than 250 watts, which means how much power goes where depends on how many devices are connected and which mode you're in. When any 2 devices are connected, the ports can deliver their individual max power because we haven't yet hit the 250 watt limit. However, once 3 or more devices come into play, modes begin to matter. The default is AI mode. I couldn't find anything explaining how this differs from algorithmic prioritization, but Anker's included Power IQ 4.0 technology combines USB PD 3.1 with programmable power supply (PPS) compatibility to communicate with connected devices and adjust voltage and current in real time in response to charging status. Nonetheless, from what I can discern, AI mode will essentially look at the power demand across the 6 ports and prioritize charging connected devices that have lower charge levels while not exceeding any individual port limits or the overall 250 watt cap. Hence why this is the default mode and the one that you're most likely to use 99% of the time. Beyond this, if you're in a pinch, switching to port priority mode, which can be enabled on any 2 of the USB-C ports at one time, tells the charger that you want to allow max output on the selected port regardless of what demand is registered on the others, which in turn just split the remaining power. Now, this doesn't just output max power on those ports, the power output is still set by consulting with the device to change the charging rate over time. For example, when charging my iPhone 16, regardless of whether I was in port priority or AI mode, the power output on C1 decreased over time in response to how charged the phone was to avoid overcharging and potentially damaging the battery. There's also dual laptop mode, which is a little more prescriptive, setting C1 and C2 to a max of 70 watts, C3 to 45 watts, C4 to 30 watts, and the combined USB-A ports to 15 watts. In this case, the power output on each port remains constant and is independent of the number of devices connected. Then there's the low current mode, which reduces the output power for phones and other low power devices. Here, C1 is limited to a max draw of 65 watts, while C2 to C4 are limited to 20 watts, and the USB-A ports share 15 watts. There's also a bonus custom power mode that's only accessible through the app once enabled under test features in the settings. This allows you to manually configure up to 4 additional modes, in each of which you define which ports are active and the max power for each port independently in 1 watt increments ranging from 15 watts up to the independent port max, provided that you don't exceed 250 watts across all of the ports. You can also set these modes to automatically deactivate once a port has no power output. In my testing, placing a digital power gauge in line with devices while they charge, the power reported on the Anker 250 watt prime charger seems to be pretty accurate, typically falling within less than half of a watt of what I was reading, though I think my tester reads at a higher frequency, which could also explain this difference. It's also worth noting 2 other things: the charger noise level and its temperature. I'm very happy to report that this charger is silent. At no point over the past month of testing did I hear the device at all, even when delivering heavier power. With regards to temperature, the gallium nitride construction does reduce heat given off and helps to keep the charger compact, but I will say that it does still get quite warm at times, especially if it's charging around 100 watts or more for 30 minutes or so. Nothing so bad that I wouldn't feel comfortable leaving my hand on the charger, but I was also only able to test up to 165 watt output, simply because I don't own enough high-powered devices to draw the maximum 250 watts at any one point in time. That said, I was able to find some users on Reddit mentioning that their chargers became exceptionally hot to the touch after about 30 minutes of sustained 250 watt charging, at which point the active shield technology noticed the temperature and the output was throttled back to 65 watts on the dominant ports. The final note I'll make here is that you need to ensure your USB cable isn't limiting how much power the charger is outputting. Simply put, not all cables are rated for 100 or 140 watts. Most are actually closer to 60 watts. So your best bet is using the cable that came with your device that you're trying to charge, because it's likely rated for the power draw of that device. For example, M1 and M2 16-inch MacBook Pros are rated for 140 watts, but only when using the USB-C to MagSafe cable that they came with, even though they can still charge at a lower rate over USB-C as well. M3 models support 140 watts either way. As I mentioned before, you have to sign up for a free Anker account to use the app, but it does provide some neat features, so I think it's worthwhile checking out. You can connect the charger to your phone via Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. I chose Wi-Fi because that enables remote access as well as firmware updates. Once you're connected, the app is pretty sleek. You can see the live output on each port, broken down by power, voltage, and current. Then below, you get a real-time plot of the total charger output that you can click on to see plots of power used over time, both total and by port. These are neat, but they only update every 10 seconds. You can't query the data, it only shows the peak, and it's limited to the current day, with no historical data stored. Going back, you can select the charging mode that you want. This is where the custom mode will appear if enabled under test features. You also get access to configuring the screensaver clock. Again, you get more clock themes here in the app than on the device itself, as well as the ability to set 12 or 24-hour format and a time period during which to display the clock, in case you wanted to use the charger on a nightstand and don't want the screen to be on all night. Beyond this, you can also independently toggle power on and off for each port, set a shutdown timer, or a power schedule for turning specific ports on and off at set times. This is pretty granular control, even if you can only set one schedule per port. After using the Anker 250-watt prime charger on my desk for the past month, I think it makes a sleek and powerful addition to my setup. I like the look of the charger and the fact that it helps me free up some wall plugs when I'm charging multiple devices at the end of the day, and though I don't know why, I really do like being able to see how much power each port is putting out. That said, the biggest drawback of the 250-watt prime charger is its price, coming in at an expensive $170 USD, though you can often get it on sale or save a little bit using my affiliate link, which I'll leave below. This is especially expensive when compared to something like Anker's own 200-watt prime charger, which has the same 6 ports and costs $100 less, though you're giving up the screen, 140-watt charging on any single port, and you get an older version of Anker's Power IQ charging technology. That said, unless you really need 250 watts or the clock features, that's probably a fair alternative. But what do you think? If you have this charger, I'd love to hear your experience in the comments below. Otherwise, if you found this video helpful, please hit the like button, consider subscribing, and I'll see you next time.